Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. AT&T and Gigapower, their joint venture with BlackRock, do plan on seeking out BEAD funding. Be right back with more. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So AT&T and a company called BlackRock formed a joint venture. They announced that back late last year, like December of last year, and then they announced that it was officially, they officially deployed that, or I guess signed everything back in May. And at that point, they announced a network in Mesa. So a little bit about that. I saw the story. So you see here, AT&T and Gigapower plan to close BEAD funding, according to the CFO. Chase BEAD funding. 4 months have passed since AT&T BlackRock launched their Gigapower fiber joint venture with projects spanning a handful of states thus far. And that was Alabama, Florida, Pennsylvania, they announced. And then shortly before that, they announced Mesa, Arizona. And they announced that AT&T would be the first tenant on that Arizona network. So these networks that Gigapower is building, this joint venture, are supposed to be open access networks. So these are networks where AT&T will be just one tenant on there. Anybody else can come in and ride that same infrastructure and offer internet services, basically retail internet services over that infrastructure that Gigapower is building. You see here, as for whether the JV, joint venture, plans to tap into broadband equity access and deployment of the BEAD program, AT&T CFO Pascal Desroches said it's a safe bet, but stressed the importance of targeting those funds in areas that make sense for us. I think it's fair to say both Gigapower and us being AT&T, will be bidding on BEAD funding, he said at a Bank of America investor conference Thursday. It's a great opportunity to really help bridge the digital divide. So when he says Gigapower and us, I'm thinking he means not just AT&T and BlackRock together as Gigapower. I think he's saying Gigapower, the joint venture, and then AT&T probably on their own. And I suspect what will happen is that in areas where AT&T can reach out adjacent in a current service area, maybe they're serving an area that's more dense and they have an area that's adjacent to them where they could use some BEAD funding. I wouldn't be surprised if right there they just bid on that directly, because that's going to be easier for them, less expensive than it would be, let's say, going a state over where they don't have any infrastructure, or even just several communities over. Whereas maybe BlackRock will bid in areas where AT&T does not have a presence at all anywhere near there. That could be a possibility that's what that's what Gigapower will do. Again, the AT&T BlackRock joint venture. So could be that some of this BEAD funding that AT&T is talking about could be direct, again, their own infrastructure, where they will bid it, they will build it, and they will be the only provider in that area. And then some other areas it may be, I suppose it could be then Gigapower, where AT&T will be just one tenant on that open access network. Gigapower aims to expand fiber outside of AT&T's footprint. And again, I'm thinking that means well outside and not necessarily in an adjacent community where they don't yet provide it, but where it's close. Its goal is to reach an initial target of 1.5 million passings, though AT&T has indicated that number could grow depending on how successful the JV is, the joint venture. Every time I see JV, I think in my head junior varsity. The way we're thinking about it is no different than we think about overall business. It's about trying to make sure that we're bidding and winning bids in the areas that make sense for us, Desroches continued. We're not getting dollars for the sake of getting dollars. We want to make sure we can get an appropriate return on those. So again, they specifically put this joint venture together to be able to expand their fiber services throughout the country without having to go out and build the infrastructure on their own. Even though they would be the only provider on that network, they're seeking a less expensive way to do that. So I think what makes sense for them is going to be different as to whether they do it themselves or whether Gigapower gets involved. It's going to be, you've got more resources to do it through the Gigapower joint venture, and there's less risk for AT&T, less money that they have to lay out for that company on its own. While he didn't provide specifics on how the Gigapower build is progressing, Desroches said AT&T so far couldn't be more pleased with how things are going, even though the joint venture is still in its early days. So again, I know there was an announcement back in May of the Mesa, Arizona network that Gigapower was building, and again, AT&T being the sole tenant, but not supposed to be the only tenant on that at that point. Asked where AT&T stands on fixed wireless access, Desroches said the company in the last few years has argued the long-term cost of providing bandwidth through fixed wireless access is much higher than with a traditional fixed line. So he's saying long-term costs. Certainly you can get into fixed wireless access much less expensive than you can with if you're going to be building, let's say, the fiber infrastructure, although you've got issues of how much spectrum do you have. And, with AT&T, who is also a mobile provider, they need to be careful about that portion of their business. So they need to make sure that they've got enough spectrum in an area for their mobile customers, probably first, before they think about maybe doing 5G service, fixed wireless 5G service somewhere. So for somebody like AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile, those are concerns for them. And in some cases like T-Mobile, if you want to get fixed wireless access in your area and they offer it, you need to see if it's still available, because they, again, have limited spectrum. And they may tell you when you go to their website that it's available now and may not be forever. So sign up while you can. So that's something kind of unique to fixed wireless access, is there is this limit of spectrum that you can have only so many customers in an area. I think as you've seen it evolve the last 2 years, we were right in that in regard to our competitors, in regard that our competitors are being much more measured than they were a couple of years ago, he said. Now, T-Mobile has gone gangbusters with the nationwide 5G service. Again, they're offering, wherever they can, they're offering it. I don't know that I've come across or heard about an area where they can't offer it any longer, but certainly they went full out because they had access before most everybody else to a lot of mid-band spectrum to be able to deploy 5G services over broad areas. Verizon started out with a good amount of millimeter wave spectrum, which can provide very fast service, much faster than, let's say, what T-Mobile is offering with their nationwide 5G, but it's very limited in its reach. So because of the high spectrum, short waves, you need small cells, and those cells can only go so far, and you'd have to have line of sight. So that's appropriate for maybe an urban area, but not really for vast areas if you're going to do that. So T-Mobile had a lot of mid-band spectrum. They've made use of that. Both AT&T and Verizon have recently got access to the C-band spectrum, full access to the C-band spectrum that they had bid on. There were some delays on that due to some airplane altimeters that could potentially have interference from that, but a lot of that's been resolved now. So you're going to see more, especially from Verizon, let's say, of fixed wireless starting to compete with T-Mobile in that arena. But it sounds like AT&T, they are moving more leaning towards the fiber side of things. Having said that, Desroches noted that there are some places where it makes a lot of sense to deploy fixed wireless access. Yeah, and that would be where they have a lot of spectrum and where it's going to be a lot more expensive, let's say, geographically difficult, or maybe fewer customers, where maybe fiber does not make sense. There are homes that we're going to ultimately get to with fiber, there are homes that we're going to ultimately get to fiber that fixed wireless may be a perfectly fine catch product, he said, explaining that's the logic behind AT&T's Internet Air 5G home internet offering, which launched a few weeks ago. So again, that's, I think, due to them having suddenly access to the C-band spectrum, the full access that they wanted. So what he's saying there is, in the short term, we'll go ahead and put out the 5G fixed wireless service at, again, this is speeds that would be over 100 by 20. So it would make an area served from that perspective, but not necessarily from BEAD, because states can say that fixed wireless access, even if it's licensed, I think there was at least one state that came out and said, even if it's licensed, we're still going to consider that not served. But it does give AT&T a foot in the door there in that area to be able to sell the service. And again, it should be a good service with fairly decent speeds for fixed wireless. So. Desroches added, fixed wireless is also a fine option for areas with low population density and where AT&T has enough power capacity. However, he reiterated, our priority is fiber. So again, they are definitely leaning towards fiber. And the way that they're doing that, what they're looking at as far as their long-term strategy is this joint venture with BlackRock. So where Gigapower would go in, and they will be the ones that primarily will be expanding AT&T's footprint in the fiber world, but it won't just be AT&T. So they can pick an area they'll build out the infrastructure, and then AT&T again can be the lead tenant, the first tenant on that network. That doesn't mean, it shouldn't mean that they get any other benefits from that, other than since it is a joint venture, it could be that they would receive some money from other tenants that maybe go on there. They may get a portion of that because it is a joint venture. They're partly owning that company, so to speak. But it's not like it's a mall where they're going to get a bigger location on the edge of the mall there, and then you got the little stores that are all in the mall as well. I mean, it's basically if AT&T comes on there, then anybody else can, including T-Mobile, including Verizon, including somebody like Ting, which is owned by Two Cows. They're building fiber, but they're also looking at being a tenant on open access broadband networks. They're doing that in a network in Colorado. I forget which city, but there's an open access network in Colorado where Ting's going to be a tenant. So anybody can come in there because there's not a high barrier to entry. You may not need to have any technical expertise. I'm not sure exactly what portions of the technology that BlackRock's doing as far as installs, because there can be different types of open access networks. You can have it where the network builder, like a Gigapower, I keep saying BlackRock. If I'm doing that, sorry, because I'm confusing them. But Gigapower is the joint venture. So if Gigapower goes in and builds that network, they're going to be building the infrastructure. So they're going to be laying all the fiber. But I don't know who's going to be doing the last mile connection. It's not even the last mile connection. Let's say the drop. So Gigapower, I'm sure, is going to be running the fiber through the neighborhoods, past buildings, and then somebody's going to have to install the fiber to the consumer that wants it. So if somebody calls up and says, "Hey, I want your new service, Mr. Gigapower, I want your new service." So does Gigapower come out and do that, or does one of the tenants, like would AT&T staff, have to come out and do that? I suspect Gigapower is going to do it, which means that really anybody who's riding that and is a tenant on that network doesn't really need to have the technical expertise. They might need to provide their own technical support, help desk services. So if the customer's having a problem with their device in the home, or they want to know how to surf the internet, or they're having a problem with security, they got a virus on their computer, maybe they can call somebody, and that will probably have to be the retail partner. But if it turns out that it sounds like the device is bad, or somebody cut the cable, then I'm assuming Gigapower is going to come out and fix that. So that means, again, that anybody with that can provide internet service anywhere can then get on this network with limited risk and be able to provide service. Now, of course, for AT&T and others, that means, because there's a low barrier of entry, that there's a lot of competition. And that's one of the reasons that the BEAD NOFO wants open access networks if possible, because you got more people on there, you've got more people providing service, and that's going to keep prices down because you got more people marketing the service. It also means lower take rates. So if you are AT&T or any of these others, well, you might go into an area that you build on your own and you're the only provider. So you're gonna put out the investment to deploy that network, that fiber network, and you're going to be the only fiber provider. Maybe there's fixed wireless there already. There might be a cable operator, but you're the only fiber operator. Then the only competition you have to worry about as far as fiber goes is no one. It's just you. You got to worry about fixed wireless access, and you've got to worry about maybe a cable operator. But here you got a fiber operator. You got AT&T. You could have Ting. You could have T-Mobile. You could have a local company come in and provide service over that, and they're all going to be competing with each other on price and on the services that they deliver over that. Because that's the other thing is, unlike maybe unregulated gas service like we have in Georgia. In Georgia, there are, I don't know how many marketers of gas service. I've got pipes running into my home from Atlanta Gas Light that I used to buy gas from, but years and years ago, they unregulated it and said, they took the Atlanta gas utility and they said, okay, we are now going to have marketers that do this. You're just going to provide the pipes and the gas, and if something breaks and somebody's got a gas leak, you go out and fix it. But these marketers are going to market the service and they're going to bill the customers. So we had a bunch of people come in. There was more competition, made the prices higher because you put a middleman in there, which was kind of interesting. So it actually made the prices go up. But they compete with each other, and you can, if you pay attention, you can see who you want to buy from, and you can go for the lowest price. And there's really not any difference in the service. I mean, the gas is the gas, right? Smells the same. If you have a leak, it's all the same thing. The only difference would be is, do they bill you properly every month? And if you ever have a problem, which is rare, and you need to call somebody, are they there and can they take your call? And usually if you have a problem, they take your call and then they refer it to Atlanta Gas because it's a problem that Atlanta Gas has to fix, right? Unless it's a billing problem. So that's different. Whereas broadband, it's a connection, but it's kind of a dumb pipe, as they say, and nobody wants to be a dumb pipe. So all of these providers can offer the things that they might offer on their own infrastructure. So if AT&T has a video offering that they offer on their own networks, they could offer they could, if it's an IPTV product, they could do the same thing over a Gigapower network. If they have a voice over IP service, or if Ting or anybody else has that kind of service, they can offer that over there. They most likely could offer maybe different speeds. They might have to pay a little bit differently to Gigapower if they offer, let's say, a gig service versus whoops, wow, that's weird. Hang on one second. My phone rang and then an app started talking to me. So, for example, they can offer different kinds of services over that network. Now I lost track of where I was, but so you've got different companies offering different services over that, and that is what the consumers then can determine they're going to make their decision based on, as well as tech support. Maybe one offers 24/7 support, the other one maybe not 24/7. I was talking about different speeds, so maybe one offers a gig service and the other one, and only a gig service, and the other one offers maybe a half a gig, so they've got a lower price plan. But they should all wind up paying the same thing. Again, I don't think AT&T would get any discount on this because they're the lead tenant. That would not seem fair. But if they are participating in the revenues of this joint venture, they will get something back from that. But again, they'd be competing. So lower risk, less reward, less potential reward, less cost, obviously, getting into it. But again, less potential reward. And everybody's going to be fighting whatever internet customers there are there. And they'll be, and those customers will be making a decision based on brand name, services offered. Some people will be like, oh, I want to go with the local company. Others will be like, well, AT&T's got this or that. And so it'll all play out. But again, I'm not sure AT&T. The other thing I'm not sure about is whether AT&T is going to be on every Gigapower network. So, well, it's part of the joint venture. It may be that they have a first right to be able to go in there and be a tenant, but they may not want to do that everywhere. That may be a decision that they make as well. There's not a lot of risk or cost in them doing it, so maybe they will, but they may choose to, in some areas not to do that. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there as well. So it is a pretty interesting thing that they're doing. It's kind of unusual, here in this country. It tends to be like a big telco like this tends to build the network themselves. They own the network themselves, and they don't let anybody else on it. But here AT&T has partnered with BlackRock to do this open access thing where they're seeing this as the best way for them to expand fiber services in lots of new territories. But again, they won't be alone. So if Gigapower builds it, AT&T can go on there, but so can everybody else. So it's a different kind of model that we're not that used to seeing here from a big telco in the United States. There's other open access networks, but usually it's an open access provider like a Utopia Fiber or Ubiquity or somebody like that, where they build a network and they are not really providing a retail product over it, but they build the network and then they get other retail providers to come in and do that. In this case, AT&T, normally building the network is not. So again, a little bit different. Thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button and ring the bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. See you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Take care.